In 1966, a young woman was found brutally murdered in rural Iowa. There were no witnesses, no arrests, no answers. For more than half a century, her case sat in silence, not forgotten, but unresolved. Her name was Sue Ellen Sherman. This is the story of what happened to her, who was responsible, and why the truth took 56 years to finally come out. Sue Ellen Sherman was 25 years old. She lived in Mason City, Iowa, a place where people knew their neighbors, left doors unlocked, and believed serious crime happened somewhere else. Sue was described as kind, independent, and careful. She worked hard, kept to herself, and was known for her gentle personality. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't chasing danger. On the evening of September 21st, 1966, Sue Ellen finished her day like any other. There was nothing to suggest that her life was about to end violently. But sometime that night, someone entered her home, and Sue Ellen never made it to the next morning. On September 22nd, Sue Ellen failed to show up for work. That alone was unusual. Concern grew quickly. When people went to check on her, they found something no small town ever wants to see. Sue Ellen Sherman was dead inside her home. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. The scene showed signs of struggle. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't natural. It wasn't self-inflicted. Someone had attacked her and then disappeared into the night. The shock rippled through Mason City. Fear followed close behind. Police launched an investigation immediately. Neighbors were questioned. Friends were interviewed. Possible suspects were discussed quietly behind closed doors. But in 1966, forensic science was limited. There was no DNA profiling, no national databases, no modern investigative tools. What investigators did have was circumstantial information, and it wasn't enough. No one could be definitively placed at the scene. No one confessed. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into years, the case slowly went cold. Sue Ellen Sherman became another unsolved name, and the person who killed her walked free. For Sue Ellen's family, the pain didn't fade. There were no answers to hold on to, no sense of justice, no understanding of why someone would do this to her. Every year that passed made the truth feel further away. The town moved on, but the case didn't disappear, it waited. Behind the scenes, investigators had suspicions. One man stood out, someone who had known Sue Ellen, someone who had been close enough to her life to raise quiet concern. But suspicion alone isn't proof. Without physical evidence strong enough to hold up in court, prosecutors had no case. The man lived his life. He worked. He aged. He was never charged. And Sue Ellen remained without justice. Time passed. Technology changed everything. By the early 2000s, DNA science had transformed criminal investigations. Cold cases that once seemed impossible were suddenly being reopened. Sue Ellen Sherman's case was one of them. Evidence collected in 1966, preserved but unusable at the time, was re-examined using modern DNA testing. And for the first time in over 50 years, the case began to speak. The DNA told a story investigators couldn't ignore. It pointed to a man named Jerry Burns. Jerry Burns had been a suspect decades earlier, but there had never been enough proof to charge him. Now, there was. The DNA matched evidence recovered from Sue Ellen Sherman's body. The man who had escaped accountability for more than half a century was finally identified. Investigators pieced together the motive. Jerry Burns knew Sue Ellen. The attack wasn't random. It was about power, control, and opportunity. Sue Ellen was alone. He had access, and in that moment, he chose violence. There was no justification, no excuse, just a decision that ended a young woman's life. But there was one final cruelty in this case. Jerry Burns was already dead. He had died years before the DNA results came back. That meant there would be no arrest, no courtroom, no sentence, but there would be truth. In 2022, authorities officially closed the case. Sue Ellen Sherman's murder was declared solved. Her name was no longer attached to a question mark. For Sue Ellen's family, the answer came late, painfully late. Justice didn't arrive in the way people hoped for. But the truth mattered. Her story was no longer unfinished. She was no longer a mystery. She was a victim who was finally believed, finally heard, and finally named in her own story. Sue Ellen Sherman was 25 years old when her life was taken. Her killer lived freely for decades. But time did not erase the truth. Some crimes don't disappear. They wait. And when the truth finally surfaces, it reminds us of something simple and heavy. Justice delayed is never harmless. But truth still matters.